Great. So, hello, how are you doing?
I'm well. I'm glad that we are able to talk.
Yes, absolutely. I appreciate you making time for me. I, I'm excited to talk to you about your new book.
Yes, Catherine the Ghost. And it's a real project of the heart for me because Wuthering Heights is a book that I have loved since I was 10 years old, since I first read it. And being able to go into that book as a writer where I have been so many times as a reader, and I'm not a big rereader, but I have reread that book numberless times. And what I find every time is that Emily Bronte was, you can't even say she was ahead of her time. She was her own time. And the sophistication, the narrative sophistication of this book, the really submolecular construction is just a masterclass. And I remember it was not on the first read, probably on the second, possibly the third, when it suddenly occurred to me because I was unfamiliar with the concept of unreliable narrator. And I suddenly realized that Nellie, the narrator of Wuthering Heights, was a goddamn liar. And I was like, oh my God, this changes everything. Oh shit. But that she was able to make that really masterly, the whole thing. I mean, you could read it in a multitude of ways, but the one way that you are not you are not offered to read it, we get Catherine through everyone else's perspective. We get her through everyone's memories and thoughts, and we never get to we hear her voice through someone else's mouth at all times. And I wanted to address that. I wanted to tell Catherine's story in her own words by herself.
That's amazing. So how long has this project been gestating kind of in your mind?
Well, I met Lisa from Clash Books at the StokerCon I was a guest 2019, right? It was right before COVID. And she and I really hit it off, and we talked about Wuthering Heights, and we started having this back and forth about it's such a punk book. It's so punk in its sensibility and so completely uncompromising. And what struck me at my first read and what strikes me now is how truthful people are in this book in really horrible ways. I mean, no punches are pulled, and the only people who are pulling the punches are basically like the civilized characters, the characters that are, the good people. And they're just awful. Those are the worst people. So we talked about that and about how, there's just some outrageous moments in this book. There's the attempted necrophilia. There's the, star-crossed teenage lovers. There's the people dying of, diseases constantly. Everybody dies almost in this book. Hardly anybody gets out alive. And they all die young too. It's just quite extreme. And so as Lisa and I were talking, we were trying to figure out how this book could happen. And Lisa brilliantly suggested the second voice of the daughter, Catherine, because Catherine the Ghost is told in alternating narrative between Catherine the mother, Kathe the mother, and Catherine the daughter. And the more I looked into, and it was such a brilliant idea, and the more that I looked into it, that second Catherine doesn't is kind of a ghost in her own life. She was born the day her mother died. Every birthday, her father goes to, cry at the grave, which is not a super great birthday if you're a kid, right? And the second half of Wuthering Heights begins when that Catherine is the same age her mother was when she died, which was just 18. And so we started talking about, well, how could these two young women meet? They never, the tagline is they never saw each other alive, and they didn't. The mother gave birth and died, and the baby was like, what? So that dialogue between them of these two women coming into control of their lives is really what drives this book. And it was just a joy to work on that way. And they, well, once they started talking, they just never stopped.
That's awesome. Did you ever get kind of cold feet during the process of kind of trying to tackle, even tangentially like a book of this stature, or did you just kind of just barrel through?
Well, my guiding light through the whole process was, would I be proud to show it to Emily Bronte? Would I be able to say I did my best? And this is what I did with your material. I had had some preparation. My novel Christopher Wilde is about Christopher Marlowe, who is another great hero of mine. And writing about him, to date, he is the only real live dead person that I have ever written about. So that was another kind of responsibility too. But to handle another writer's work, you keep your hands clean and you remember whose work you're dealing with. So that's why the book itself is dedicated to Emily Bronte. And the line is hard to govern any way but her own. So I tried to keep to her path, and hopefully I succeeded.
That's fantastic. So it's coming out in October. How anxious are you for it to get into people's hands?
Oh, very wildly anxious. The pre-orders are out now, and I'm starting to hear from readers, so I'm super excited about that. And I'll be having a launch event in Detroit on the 25th, and it's a ghost dance party. So
That's awesome.
we're going to have a party at a gallery is hosting us, and we will have some installation art based on the book and some Halloween candy, and we're inviting people to wear ghostly attire and come to the event. So, again, we're always remembering, in whose shadow we are. And so Emily is 100% invited to the launch, and maybe she'll do us the honor of showing up.
That's amazing. And now, have you ever thought of someday someone comes along and wants to have kind of their own dialogue with one of your books?
Oh, that would be super cool. Yeah, I would love to see that. I would love to see, because I think that's, in some ways, that's the highest compliment that a reader can pay. I mean, obviously this is, Wuthering Heights is a book that I'm obsessed with. I don't have multiple copies of other novels, but I have multiple copies of that. And being able to go into it that way was a huge homage to her work. And I would love to see someone do that. Unless they're Nazis, in which case, sorry, the no Nazi light is permanently on. But other than that, have at it.
That's fun. That's fun. So to varying degrees, your book deals with, I mean, there's a ghost at the core of it. So, what do you think is the attraction people have with ghosts in general?
I think partially we want to get some kind of handle on what it's going to look like on the other side of life, and whatever your belief system may offer or conclude, really no one knows. I mean, there's a panoply of evidence, but none of it would stand up in a court. So it's anecdotal. Although that being said, so many of us have had that feeling of, there is more, or there is something else, or, for good or for bad, feeling like, oh, I've been in this place and I don't like it. It doesn't feel safe here. There feels like there might be something here that I can't see. Or, conversely, wow, this place, I feel happy here. I feel like life took place here, and there might be some good echoes of that. So I think especially, not necessarily the older you get, but the more maybe we think about how fragile our own lives are, and the lives of the ones we love, and the life of our planet. We are teetering in a very strange time. And I think the idea of having any idea of what comes next might feel kind of good now.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Is we are definitely kind of in a big deep shadow culturally and as a human race. So I yeah, I can absolutely see that. And we kind of uh we make our own ghosts a lot, as far as kind of we obsess over things in the past, and we're always chasing the past so much, and kind of trying to conjure ghosts, that it seems natural that we're beyond beyond wanting answers from of what comes next. Is just we want this kind of resolution to things that there's they're threads that can't be tied. They're just loose.
Right, and that complete finality of death, the first time it crosses your path in your own life, if it's a family member or friend or whatever tragedy it might be, it's a real shocker. No matter how prepared you think you are not prepared, because that person's gone. You are not talking to that person again, ever. And trying to get your Gene Wolfe wrote a story about something very different, but he has a character in that story say, "You think you know what forever is, but you don't." Like, no, we have a hard time contemplating that. And the people in Wuthering Heights are also very young too, even though the mortality rate was different for them, but they're all quite young, and they are living all the time in that kind of shadow. And sort of, someone suggested to me that it was like people in war, where you're not super concerned about what's going to happen 10 years from now. It's like, I would just like to get to the end of this week, and that would be great, and then I'll worry about it after that. But I think what you say is very, very true about we construct our own ghosts. And you and I had talked a little bit beforehand about belief in ghosts. Like, literally, do you believe in whatever you conceive ghosts to be or what they could be? And I would say absolutely. I would say, first, I would never rule out anything in a metaphysical way. That is way above my pay grade to say there is, yes, there is, or no, there isn't. But I think that feeling of energy is what's very convincing. When you even when you go into like a performance space, as you know so well, in a theater or in a venue or something that has held performances, and the longer the better, you can feel that energy. That space is very much alive still. And there are bad places like that too. There's a photographer, her name is Julia Solis, who took photographs of abandoned places long before it was chic. And some of them are almost impossible to even look at. They are so disturbing and frightening. Some of them are hospitals where mentally challenged people were held, and just the thought of even going in there. And she writes very convincingly about being, and she's a very hard-headed person. I know Julia, she's not prone to fancies.
I don't know if you can hear me. I can't hear you.
Still no?
Yes, there you are. Sorry,
Okay, all right, all
the
right.
connection went dodgy. So sorry.
No, it's like the idea of touching a live wire. I mean, it's still there, right? Whether it knows that you're there or not is immaterial. If
Yeah.
you touch it, it's going to knock you on your ass across the room. So if you're lucky. So those kind of really spiritually charged or spectrally charged places, I do believe exist.
No, I could definitely see that. Especially with performance places, because if you think of humans kind of like a biological battery, and you kind of you charge up an area so much, and then it has when we're gone, it's still and it's or you think of a place that floods a lot. Like there's always going to be dampness, and so there's always something there, and it's just and it's and I don't. I mean, I'm wishy-washy on what I believe, but like it's nice. It's interesting to hypothesize, but like it makes you wonder if when people have like great performances, if maybe they're kind of tapping into the energy that's there and are really kind of like feeding on it. And in kind of the same way, someone has a bomb performance, like they're bringing their own kind of like battery drain, and it's just like draining everything out of it, and it's just just a flat experience.
Right. And the audience has energy too. So it's
Yeah.
all that human energy there for, and it's amoral in that sense. It's just there. It's there to be used. There's a at the end of Wuthering Heights and at the end of Catherine the Ghost, the character Nellie, the unreliable narrator Nellie, is talking about how she does not like to be left alone in the house Wuthering Heights after both Kathy and Heathcliff are dead. She wants to move away and she doesn't want to be there anymore. And in Catherine the Ghost, Kathy's like, yeah, because now we know what you did. And yeah, our energy is, we are definitely there. We are very much present. And so that could be interpreted as, for Nellie, that's a malign feeling. Like, I don't like to be in this house in the dark because something's here with me and it doesn't wish me any particular well at this point.
Oh, for sure. Now, have you ever experienced anything kind of out of the ordinary yourself?
I have, but what's difficult in the telling sometimes is that these experiences can be so subtle that that's why I'm always blown away in ghost movies. And I don't know about you, man, but if I saw a dish fall off a table and nobody touched it, that would be enough for me. I wouldn't go, oh, I don't, it's like that isn't possible. And yet I just saw it. That is why one of my favorite ghost movies in the world is called Personal Shopper. And Kristen Stewart plays a young woman who is a personal shopper for second tier celebrity, but she is staying in this position and in Paris to get some kind of a signal from her brother. They had made a pact that if one of them died, they would contact the other one. And the moments in that film where you could believe either way, they're not even frightening. They're past that. They're so profoundly strange, because that's the implication there is, if this is true, then there is an entire universe of energy and happening and causation that we don't know anything about. It's like discovering there's a different physics, right? There's like physics and then there's other physics, and you're like, okay, this changes everything. And those moments are very hard to quantify, and they're very smartly done in that film, because you could, if you wanted to, almost to the very end of the movie, you could willfully say, no, that's not happening. That didn't happen, or I'm just feeling this, or I'm thinking this, but yeah, I have experienced things like that where I could put no name to it. And you almost can't describe it afterwards, because we don't have the full language for it, or I don't have the full language for it.
Have you ever seen? I think thinking of this movie, this seemed like a movie to be straight up your alley. Have you ever seen the movie A Ghost Story?
Mm-mm.
Oh my goodness. I think you would love it. It is story of a man, he's married, and he dies suddenly and tragically. And then he is back in his home, and he has to watch his wife go through the grief and then move on. and then move away, and he's stuck there, and he goes through the house, and he's stuck, and I can't I want to say Casey Affleck is the ghost, but and he's has a full-on ghost sheet on, and he's desperate to make a connection, and he just has to watch these people that come and they move into the house and move out, and it's like time passes and he's kind of trapped there because he can't move on. And it's a great movie, and it's a very, very it's very emotional movie. It's really, really good, really good.
And that's a hard subject to tackle because either people tend to fully believe one way or another and are pretty, or they think of a ghost sighting or a ghost encounter as something necessarily malign, like, they're coming for you, and that makes more sense, that idea that the ghost is still fixated, that energy is still pointed in the same direction it was when that person was alive. That wouldn't necessarily include you or anybody else, right? I mean, maybe if you crossed its path, yes, but maybe not. I'm trying to remember, and I don't have the book anymore. I had a research book in the writing of this about those kinds of encounters, and sometimes the people involved, there was a level of almost comical stubbornness where there was clearly something, and everything in that book was malign, unfortunately, but there was clearly something wrong in the places that they were. And sometimes they just would not acknowledge that and get out, right? Where you're saying, now it's at a pathological stubbornness, right? Like, I don't believe in that and I'm not leaving. It's like being, like you say, in a flood. It's like the water's up to your shins, boss. You better reevaluate what's going on here, because whether you believe it or not, the water is rising and something's going to happen, because especially that idea of dammed up energy. And one of the things that I tried hard to do in Catherine the Ghost was not necessarily make it like, oh, it's a ghost, she sees her mother's ghost, but that feeling of, I don't know my mother, I don't know anything about my mother, and now I'm back in the house where she grew up. How can I find traces of her, because no one will talk about her to me? And then those things that she learns are very emotionally charged, as they would be, right? It's you're a young person who has never known your mother, and now you're getting these objects that are hers to hold, and that feeling of, is there a psychic charge in what she's holding? Her mother's books, the bed her mother slept in, all this stuff. They have the same name, right? So you could decide, no, all these things are in her mind if you want to, or you can read it and say, she is having a dialogue with this person in a way that she doesn't necessarily, she can't put words to, but by the end she doesn't need to. She's accepting what is happening and has the best understanding of anybody, in the tale of what is actually going on.
It's interesting to think, I mean, because if you think about it, since you could write letters and stuff, and whenever, since you can make a mark, we've been connected to the past in kind of ways like ghosts. But as we move forward technologically, we're kind of making ghosts more substantial. Like it came to my mind, since before my daughter was born, I was recording messages for her, and I've been gathering all of this stuff for her. And when we've told her bedtime stories and stuff, and I've recorded some of them, and I'm putting it all on a hard drive. And so there's a day in the future, if something were to happen, even whenever someday, like, I will exist kind of as a ghost. In one way or another, because there's ways that your kid can never know you, like they know you as a parent, and they should never know you as your friend or something, like one-to-one like that. But so that kind of stuff has got to be, it's weird. My parents were of an age, like they were World War II, that they were the baby boom basically,
Mm.
in before, I guess. But So I didn't, that wasn't possible to know them like that, but it's interesting now. Kids, you'll go and you'll have like their social media profiles that they had and all of these images and videos and all this stuff. It's just interesting.
And that it is very much the self, but very much not the self, right? It's not, it will never be the same, but it is a living artifact in that sense. And I think our experience of, yearning makes a ghost, right? I mean, you generally, at least from the human side, you're trying to understand, or you're trying to see, or you're trying to, and sometimes it seems to have nothing at all to do with you. A story that pops to mind, I was directing and producing a show in an old building in Detroit, and my friend and co-conspirator, collaborator, the installation artist I was working with, is very attuned to phenomena. And I kept telling her that we were working on, it used to be an old sound stage during the World War II, and they would do military, here's a tank, or whatever they would do. So it's a huge place, huge, quiet, empty, with a catwalk and then another gallery type balcony above. And I kept seeing something on the corner. She and I were working in there alone all the time, and setting up the installation. And I kept seeing these things out of the corner of my eye, and it was always on the stairs, and it was going up to the gallery part, the like the mezzanine that we were not using. And finally I said to her, here's what is happening. Are you seeing anything? And she said, no. I said, what can we do about it? And so she marched over to the stairs and said very firmly, we acknowledge that you're here, but you have to go, because we are working hard now, and we, don't have any time for any shenanigans. And, not meanly, but like, no, you're not part of this. You need to peace out. And that was the end of it. That was it. There was no more. And I'm like, well, how'd you know to do that? She said, well, sometimes you just have to, tell them what's what. It's like, and it wasn't the feeling of this is bad, or it was just, I know I'm seeing something out of the corner of my eye, but I don't know what I'm seeing, and I don't know what to do about it. And if she hadn't known what to do about it, I guess it would have kept going on. And maybe it goes on still. Maybe it was particular to what we were doing. We were doing a Marlowe play. Our title was Night School. And so maybe, who knows?
It's interesting that, and heaven knows, I like because I tend towards the creepy, like my interest. But it's interesting that our fictions and stuff are more of that kind. But like ghosts in reality seem more about the longing and this desperate loneliness and like need for connection and attention. Like a lot of it is so much
right
to get attention, and they just want to be like seen isn't the right word, but like acknowledged. They want that.
Right. And I would think that there's in the very beginning of Catherine the Ghost, she says, she's talking about being dead. And she says, the moors stretch as far as the stars that circle like moths in the great blackness. I have climbed past those vast black crags, past what heaven is, past the scorn of the angels, back to these moors that hold this night's hissing snow and churning trees, back and back and back to the heights. My struggle is immense. And that feeling, what you just said, of acknowledge me, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. And the frustration must be, unbearable. I'm still here. It's like being buried alive, really. I mean, I'm still here. I'm still here. In Wuthering Heights, we are introduced to the idea of Catherine by the stupid lodger who comes to stay over. He's trapped there by the snow and stays overnight. And he sleeps in her old bedchamber. He's not supposed to, but a maid puts him in there. And he has a waking dream where somebody is beating on the window and saying, let me in, let me in, let me in. So to get that attention or to complete the circuit, let's say, right? It's like, I need somebody's attention to complete this circuit, to make me be able to exist on this plane or in this energy again, because my own energy is somewhere else.
Yeah, so much about ghosts is about finding closure, and I think it's because we like the living, so few times, like we find such little closure in things, and we ourselves are desperate for closure on things. So I mean, maybe it's a projection, or maybe it's just part of the human experiences. We want, this is the beginning, this is the middle, this is the end. We want, and that's not how it works. Like, somebody always leaves in the middle of the dance. Like, the record changes in the middle of the song. That's the way it works. And that's just how it always works.
And it's a way of trying to assert a control that we don't really have, right? But to say, and even in our narratives are like that in any kind of narrative. How defrauded are we when we don't get to know how something ended, right? We're like, that sucks. They canceled that, and now I'll never know how it ended. I didn't, I never read the last book, or the last book didn't come out, or you can't leave it like that. We are desperate for an ending, for an understandable ending, or at least an ending that, even if we don't like it, right, that we can accept it and say, okay, that's how, I guess that's how it has to be.
Yeah.
But and this whole all of Wuthering Heights and all of the deep ghost stories do turn on that axis of, and not even necessarily longing, but yeah, I acknowledge me, I'm here, and for good or ill, I will make you acknowledge that.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure that's where, when you get into kind of the malevolent spirits, it's that failure to acknowledge, and it's sadness and sorrow and loss turns, all of those things when they calcify, become malevolence. I mean, it becomes, it's the lonely person by themselves becomes the mean old person because no one ever acknowledged them. They're angry, and that's what that turns into.
Or they were mean anyway.
Yeah.
They were mean to begin with, and now they're, maybe trapped in that, and getting worse, and it's not making you. I can't imagine that going through, the trauma of death is a ton of fun.
Oh yeah.
Even if you are glad to leave, your meat sack because it's in trouble, it has to feel pretty traumatic. I mean, we'll all find out, but it is the thing that you have to do by yourself, just as I imagine, even though you're born, you're not really sharing that with anybody. You're saying, man, what is happening? This is not, and I don't have language or concept for any of this. And what, and people may be going, that doesn't mean anything to you. You're like, man, who even are these people?
Well, so much of nature seems like it is, like it's all seems laid out before us, that but we're seeing, can't see the forest for the trees kind of thing. Like, we come from darkness, and at birth we come from darkness into all of this light and this noise and everything, and it seems like death is the reverse, and then suddenly we're all of this light and noise, and then it's silence again, and we hope it's blissful silence where it's like, okay, good, I'm finally alone with what I am, and and to the greater whatever. But
You see that in babies. You see that when they're very small, there comes a point in every day, I mean, they just zone out. Their little eyes just go whoop, like I'm on tilt. I've had enough stimulation. I've had enough intake. I got to stop, and we see that in our animals too. When they're overstimulated, stimulated, they will turn away, they will hide, it's like, enough, I can't take anymore. And we might, that might be, that's why I like the idea of the Buddhist idea of the bardo. And it's like, there's this time in between, this in between space where we can kind of reckon with ourselves, and not in the sense of, are you going to hell, are you this, or are you that, but that idea of reckoning with the choices that the self made, and saying our lives were the total of all the choices we made. And is that good, is that bad, would we do something differently, like all the 10 things people wish they knew before they died, right? It's like, I wish I'd have worked less. Well, yes and no. What was your job? You know what I mean? The idea of regret, because death is the thing that really slams that door, and now you're done. And whatever you did, whatever's left undone is left undone. And whatever you did is done. And those actions may reverberate for decades, or, for good or bad, right? But it's over, and now nothing else can be added or taken away. And if you are what is the Egyptian mythos of you're weighed against this?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Coin, it's a thing, and or a feather, or something really light, and it's like, oh, that's
you're good to go.
Right. And if you're out of balance, then I guess you're out of balance, and that's a real problem for you, because now you're in trouble. Yeah, we have been trying in all the religious myths and stories, we've been trying to quantify that forever, right? Like, what happens when in Wuthering Heights, there's a moment where, and in Catherine the Ghost too, where Kathe has a dream that she died and went to heaven, and she didn't want to be there, and the angels were so mad that they threw her out, and she was so happy, and she in the dream, she woke from the dream crying with happiness that she was back at Wuthering Heights, and she said, heaven didn't seem to be my home. So her idea of an afterlife, and which is what is so great about Wuthering Heights, is that, and so maddening too, it is so purely a ghost story, 150%, and yet it so often does not get read as a ghost story. It gets read as a love story, as a Gothic story. This is a ghost story. Everybody in this book believes in ghosts. Everybody. And are pretty matter of fact about it too. So they would have no problem with Catherine the Ghost. They would say, you're right. That's how it is.
I'm about to lose you, unfortunately.
Okay.
So when is Catherine the Ghost officially out? Anybody can get it.
Catherine the Ghost will be officially released on October 15th, and will be available to all ghost likers and book readers and friends of Emily. And if you are in the Detroit and greater Detroit area, the 25th, October 25th, at Kickstart Gallery in Farmington, and it's on all my socials. That is the launch party, and you are heartily invited to come.
Thank you so much, as always. I appreciate you, and I'm excited for your new book. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Always glad to talk, and thanks for making the time.
Absolutely. You take care.